Welcome to Michigan's WW1 Centennial News Report for March 2016, War Vegetable Gardening. I'm your host, Dennis Skupinski. One of the ways you can participate in a WW1 Centennial is by growing a war garden. This can be a large field next to your house, a lot in your backyard, or simply a planter box on the windowsill. In this program, we'll examine large and small war gardens, how to plan one, and everything you'll need to know to get one started this summer. March 17, 2016, at the Pritzker Military Museum and Library located in Chicago, Susan Menegay, WW1 Centennial Project Coordinator, organized the WW1 Centennial Midwest Regional Meeting. From the National WW1 Centennial Commission, the National Coordination Team Director of Operations, Rebecca Wilson, was in attendance. Also presenting was Colonel Thomas Mole, who is a National Commissioner of the WW1 Centennial Commission, and also with the state of Ohio. From the WW1 Memorial Design Team, which will be featured in Pershing Park, Washington, D.C., was architect Joe Weishauer. A century ago, March 1st, 1916, German U-boats began attacking ships in the Atlantic. March 7th, 1916, in Munich, Germany, the automobile company BMW was founded. March 8th, 1916, United States Marines enter Cuba for the third time. They are trying to support President Meneco, whose political administration is rife with corruption and graft. March 9th, about 4:15 a.m., attacking from the southeast and the west, General Pancho Villa raided the town of Columbus, New Mexico, killing several U.S. soldiers and taking away equipment, rifles, mules, and horses. He was driven back by the 13th U.S. Cavalry. Also on March 9, 1916, President Wilson, after the attack, appointed Newton D. Baker to fill the vacant position of Secretary of War. He wasted no time in declaring that there would be a punitive expedition led by General John J. Pershing to kill or capture Villa. March 15, 1916, President Woodrow Wilson sends 12,000 U.S. troops over the U.S.-Mexican border to pursue General Pancho Villa. March 14, 1916, Battle of Verdun. The Germans are attacking west of Verdun on the Mort Homme Ridge. March 22, 1916, the temporary Emperor of China, Yuan Shikai, abdicates the throne, and the Republic of China is restored once again. During this program, we're going to go over the basics of a war garden, what it was like 100 years ago, and how you can reproduce a war garden today, whether it's in your backyard or simply a tabletop garden. The topics we'll be covering during this program are planning your war garden, the location of it, soil and manure, fertilizer, compost, soil preparation, the selection of crops, indoor planting, transplanting, when to plant, fall planting, laying off rows, and increasing your harvest. Everything you'll need to know to grow your own war garden. The first topic is planning. Have a garden plan. Drawn to scale on paper. Put in one general group small plants like beets, onions, lettuce, carrots, radishes, and parsnips. In another general group, put in larger plants like corn, tomatoes, potatoes. Spreading ground vines like melons and cucumbers, which need wider spacing. The reason for this grouping is that various plants in a group need similar general treatment as well as spacing. The location of the garden and the location of the plants in the garden is very important. Those plants which ripen their fruit, such as tomatoes and eggplants, require the greatest amount of sunshine, while lettuce, spinach, kale, and other leaf crops require relatively less. Foliage crops must have at least 3 hours of sunlight a day, and plants which ripen fruit at least 5 hours a day. The location of your garden will depend on the crops you're going to plant and the amount of sunshine that's available. The war gardener must use the soil he has, but can improve it. Manure will even help the richest soil, and you are not likely to use too much of it. Loam is the best garden soil. Sand with manure give good results. Clay is the hardest to work with, but is greatly improved by well-rotted manure and vegetable matter, called humus. These should be well worked in with a hoe and rake. Sifted coal ashes entirely free of clinkers will also help loosen up the clay when mixed into it, but will not remove any acid condition nor increase fertility. To supplement the manure and compost in your war garden, go to your local hardware store and get a commercial fertilizer. Usually you want something that has 3 to 4% nitrogen, 8 to 10% phosphoric acid, and also potash. Fertilizer should be spread over the surface of finely prepared seedbed at a rate of 5 pounds per 10 square foot plot just before planting. The surface soil will then be thoroughly raked so as much of the fertilizer is mixed in the first 2 inches of soil. Never place seed or transplanted plants in direct contact with fertilizer. Thoroughly mixing the fertilizer with the soil is essential to prevent injury of seeds or roots. Where manure is used, use about half as much fertilizer. Tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, spinach, and other crops requiring a long growing season are benefited by a second application of fertilizer when half grown. Between the rows, scatter about 4 ounces for every 10 feet of row. To ensure even distribution, mix the fertilizer with fine dry earth just before spreading. One of the most important things you can do for your war garden is form a compost pile. A compost pile is alternate layers of soil with organic waste. You can use garden waste and also stuff from your kitchen. And what you want to do is let this sit for 6 to 12 months so the organic waste has a chance to rot. This releases a lot of the chemicals back to the soil. This is the best fertilizer you can use for your garden. A compost pile is a great way to recycle your food waste and also ensures that you're going to have great soil in the future. To prepare your war garden for the planting season, you need to go out and prepare the soil. After the frost goes out, test the ground by squeezing a handful of it. If it crumbles, the soil is ready for spading. If it packs into a mud ball, the ground is still too wet and should not be worked. Spade deeply when you do, 8 to 15 inches unless the latter turns up poor soil and buries rich soil from the top. Pulverize the dirt deeply with a hoe, spade, and rake, breaking all the clots on the surface. Selection of crops for your war garden, whether it's tabletop or backyard or community garden, is very important. Gardens should be devoted as far as possible to those crops which are the most useful for food and which have the least chance for failure. The selection of vegetables for the home garden should be staples such as potatoes, beans, tomatoes, corn, onion, and cabbage. Crops of next importance such as peas, carrots, parsnips, beets, squash, greens, turnips, and cauliflower, radishes, and celery should also be grown if space in the garden permits. Cauliflower, muskmelons, watermelons, onions from seed, asparagus, cucumbers are some of the plants that are the most difficult to raise, and these are not recommended to the average gardener. In order to maximize your war garden during the short growing season, it's recommended to start your plants indoors, usually tomatoes and pepper plants. Any container will do that's shallow and wide. Put 1 inch of gravel or cinders at the bottom for drainage and fill the top with potting soil. Rows of plants may be planted 2 inches apart. Plant 8 to 10 seeds an inch. Keep the soil damp and set the box in a window. When the plants are an inch high, transplant them to another seeded box. spacing plants 2 inches apart. This ensures sturdy plants with good root systems. Once the threat of frost is gone, it's time to move your plants from indoors to your war garden. Transplanted plants cannot stand strong sunshine at first, and cloudy days in late afternoon are preferable for transplanting. Make sure you thoroughly water your plants so the dirt sticks to the root systems. In your garden, dig a hole wider and deeper than you're going to need, and then transplant the plant. Then, with your hands, move the soil and firmly pack your plant into the garden. When heavy frosts are over, it's time to start planting your peas, onion sets, lettuce, spinach, and kale. When frosts are about over, plant your radishes, parsnips, carrots, beets, and late peas and sweet corn. When all frosts are over and apple trees are in bud, plant string beans and late sweet corn and set out a few early tomato plants from the indoor boxes. When apple trees are finished blooming, plant cucumbers, melons, squashes, lima beans, and set out the rest of your indoor plants. One way to increase the yield from your war garden is to do a fall planting. Such plants as lettuce, spinach, turnips, parsley, and onions can be planted in late August, early September, and usually harvested before they are damaged by the frost. Straight rows add to the beauty of the garden and is easier for cultivation. The simplest way to lay them off is to stretch a stout string between 2 stakes and mark a row with a hoe or a stick. One way to increase the harvest from your war garden is by increasing your growing season. The way to do this is starting your plants indoors and transplanting them outdoors early in the season. They will mature early, and thus they can be replaced with another set of plants late in the season. You can't do this with all your plants, but one example of this is a tomato plant. You can have 2 tomato crops during your season if you start early in the spring with an indoor planting. War gardens come in all shapes and sizes. During the war, it was emphasized to use all space available. So whether you're using a cup on your desk, a pot in your patio, a small plot of land in your backyard, or a community garden, you can participate in a WW1 Centennial by growing a war garden. More information will be posted on Michigan's WW1 Centennial Facebook page for those of you who have more questions about war gardening.